Welcome back to the channel, everyone. It is time to do another compilation video. If you haven't seen these before, it's basically a big playlist we put into one video. We did a bunch of them early last year, and I kept getting asked to do one about the worst countries, the countries that are dying, that type of thing. So I gathered 9 videos, and I think it's about 100 different things. One of them's got like 25 countries on it. But for the most part, it's a little over 100 different items about countries throughout the world, and they're all of a negative type thing. Like I said, the most atheist countries, some people might not see that as a negative, but some do. Collapsing ones, the poorest ones, the most dangerous ones, they're all in this video. Let's get started with our first one that we did back in early 2023 called Countries That Are Going Downhill in 2023. Let's take a look. What countries do you think are on their way to a total collapse or at least go downhill in 2023? In this video, I'm going to tell you which ones I think are going downhill and why. This is the 3rd video in our downhill series. We've already done states and cities in the US, so before we start looking at who's going to be doing better, we have to finish up with who's going downhill. Every country, large or small, city, town, everyone took a hit the last few years because of the pandemic. Some, in my opinion, have set themselves up for success post-COVID. Others, not so much. Today, we're looking at those countries that fall into the not so much category. This video is my opinion. It is based on information that I've taken in over the last year or two. And it's based on things that I've seen, and it's not based on any one stat or one figure. There's a lot of things that go into this. Are these countries 100% bad? No, not really. Will they struggle in the next year and probably beyond? I think so. If you think a country shouldn't be on this list or you think one should have been on this list, I would love to hear about it in the comment section below. These are just my opinions and why. Yours, I'm sure, are just as valid. Get it? Got it? Good. Let's take a look. Number 10, El Salvador. El Salvador is a Central American country with about 6.8 million residents. It has Honduras to the east, the Pacific Ocean to the west, and Guatemala to the north. El Salvador is a beautiful country with incredible landscapes and great people. They just have made some bad decisions and had some bad things happen there. There's a lot of history from the colonial period and before. The colonial period was not great for the indigenous people. They also had a civil war from 1979 to 1992 where they estimate about 75,000 people were killed. That's just an estimate. There are thousands and thousands that are unaccounted for. El Salvador's economy has been hampered multiple times by natural disasters like earthquakes and hurricanes, by government policies, total corruption. You name it, it's worked against the El Salvadorian economy. Just last year, the president, who's a big cryptocurrency enthusiast, he decided to make Bitcoin a legal tender in El Salvador. It's only been a year, but most experts say it's a disaster. A lot of people might think this is great. El Salvador is a cryptocurrency dream. But really, it's like a cautionary tale at this point. Trust has fallen to the point where it really looks like El Salvador in the next few years, especially in the next 6 months, are going to fall on some hard times. Now, like I said, it's only been a year and there still is potential for this to kind of turn around and bring in outside investment. But it's not really showing much sign of that right now. That's why I think they're going downhill in the next year, at least. Now keep in mind, this isn't the worst countries on the planet. These are the ones that I think will go downhill the most over the next year at least. Some countries are so bad they can't go any lower. Number 9, Belarus. Belarus has attached itself to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. They're one of the few countries that is backing Russia on this, and they're paying the price. Western sanctions have been hard on Russia, and because of its stance, Belarus is now feeling the effect. This just isn't US sanctions. This is like everyone's sanctions almost. As this war drags on, and if Belarus stays aligned with Russia, it's just going to get worse for the entire country of Belarus. I mean, it's too bad. This is a beautiful country with great people. It's just they're politically aligned in a way that it's really going against what most of the world's doing right now. Number 8, South Africa. South Africa has a lot of problems. One, crime is kind of out of control. South Africa took an exceptionally large hit when it came to the pandemic. COVID-19 wrecked the economy of this country. Now they are recovering a little bit, but poverty and unemployment are still really bad in South Africa. Combine that with the serious drought they're facing right now, it's like a disaster cocktail. And that's why I think South Africa is going to be going downhill in 2023. Number 7, the United States. Yep, I believe we're going downhill. We have been for quite a few years. The pandemic hit the United States just like everyone else, but we had a little bit of an additive, I guess you could say. The facts and conspiracies put Americans at each other's throats over something that we should have all got together to try and defeat. So not only were we fighting a pandemic, we were fighting each other over it. And that, I think, will have lasting effects on the United States. We've got political turmoil, we have inflation problems, we have gas price problems, healthcare problems, supply chain problems, a worker shortage. But really, the political turmoil is the biggest thorn in the paw of the United States right now. I'm not saying where you stand is either good or bad, but I mean, we've had the Supreme Court make some decisions that have been unpopular with half the country. You got that total shit show that's swirling around every aspect of the 2020 election. You know, anytime I see anything on the news about that whole thing, I just remember that show, The Osbournes. Remember that Ozzy Osbourne, the reality TV show about his family? Well, his son, Jack Osbourne, said something that has always stuck with me. And it's not like I go to Jack Osbourne for wisdom or guidance or anything like that. Actually, he's probably one of the last people this sentence just stuck with me. He said that historically, countries or civilizations don't last that long. And he said he didn't see the United States lasting another 50 years. Sometimes you see things that are going on in Washington, D.C. here in the United States, and you think, yeah, maybe Jack Osbourne's onto something. I hope not. I like my country. Number 6, Pakistan. Pakistan's been in bad shape for some time now. I think it all started when India got nukes some time ago. They decided they need nukes because their neighbor had nukes. Sure, half their people were starving, but they needed nukes. When they first started doing their testing years ago, they had the people in the streets celebrating their new nuclear program. You're looking at these people going, yeah, they were forced to be there. Financially, since the pandemic, Pakistan is doing incredibly bad. Pakistan has already initiated talks with the International Monetary Fund for a bailout package. A Karachi-based newspaper called Dawn, in an editorial, noted that any further delay in the IMF agreement would only cause irreversible damage to the economy of Pakistan, and said their current situation is unsustainable. They're also suffering from fallout from the war in Ukraine. And they just had devastating floods that are sure to create a food crisis. Yeah, I don't see 2023 getting any better for them. Probably 24, 25, 26, if nothing else happens. Number 5, Sri Lanka. You ever heard of Sri Lanka? I have. I used to go to school with some kids from Sri Lanka. Well, now they're like 50, but they were kids when I knew them. So I knew all about the country. A couple of them did speeches in a speech class I had, and it really sounds like a beautiful country. And I got to tell you, they were some of the sweetest people I've ever met. One of their moms, and I'm not even going to attempt to do the accent, but it was just great. She's all, "You're Mr. Briggs. I understand you have quite the funny bone." Of course, I snickered. Sri Lanka's economic crisis that was triggered by a debt default, food, and fuel shortages has led to violence in the streets. They've had quite a few riots, and some bad things are happening there. This has hit the headlines, but several other countries are seeing the same thing, like the one we just talked about, Pakistan, South Africa's in that, Nepal, Ethiopia, Ghana, Peru. They're all facing the same thing. Sri Lanka is in the grip of ballooning debt, trade deficits, and falling foreign exchange reserves. The COVID-19 pandemic and the Russia-Ukraine conflict have pushed debt levels sky high in Sri Lanka and other countries. It's actually quite alarming. I wouldn't be surprised if there wasn't some kind of coup, the president steps down, or they have an all-out civil war in Sri Lanka soon. Number 4, China. Yes, the economic power of China is not doing great right now. Do I think they're going to collapse? Absolutely not. Do I think they're going to see a couple rough years? I think they are. They've already had to freeze people's funds at different banks to stop the banks from collapsing. The thing is, the economy for China has been incredible over the last few decades, and it's continued to grow. The problem they have now, they're a victim of their own success. Now, I'm not going to get all into it. I will tell you that Graham Stephan, he's a YouTuber, he's gone really in depth on it on a few different videos. I'll link one down below. But I'm in total agreement with him that it's already started to go down and they're already facing financial problems. It's just going to get worse in 2023. Now, he also mentioned how China has been using bots to suppress information from videos like this one. So make sure you like the video, please. Number 3, Ukraine. Unless you've been living off the grid since January of 2022, I'm sure you know that Russia invaded Ukraine about 200 days ago, a little bit over. Russia, of course, thought it was going to be a big walk in the park and they just take the country over. It hasn't turned out that way. And this thing has dragged on, like I said, over 200 days now. There's no end in sight. Ukraine is basically in shambles right now, and the damage that has been done will take decades to repair. Ukraine was in debt before the war to the tune of about $20 billion. That doesn't sound like much to China and the United States. That's big to Ukraine. Now, I'm sure there's going to be all kinds of debt forgiveness and, they're going to put things on hold and aid will come in once this is over. But right now, in the near future, it's not going to get any better. It's affecting other countries in Europe too. Ukraine is among the world's top food producers and exporters and is often described as the breadbasket of Europe. Yeah, do I think Ukraine's gonna go downhill in 2023? Absolutely. Number 2, North Korea. This shouldn't shock anyone. I mean, everybody knows that North Korea is in bad shape. They got serious food shortages. They've got serious economic problems, and they've closed themselves off to the world. Just about everyone except for China. And as we've already learned, China's starting to have some problems. And I think what's going to happen to North Korea is sort of what happened to Cuba. When the Soviet Union collapsed, the checks quit coming in the mail. So you have another one of those countries where the people are starving, but they do have nuclear weapons to keep them warm at night. But I see the economic future of North Korea being in step with whatever goes on in China. The difference is, China sees it as a small blip on their economy and it'll recover in a couple years. North Korea is in a much more dire situation. A lot more people are going to die of starvation in that country. All right, before we get to number 1, don't forget to hit that like button. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. We also have a channel called On This Day. There's a link down below. All right, on to number 1. And number 1, Russia. Yep, Russia and their war in Ukraine is going to devastate this country for years to come. U.S. intelligence estimates that there is some 15,000 Russian soldiers that have been killed so far in Ukraine, and 3 times that wounded. That is about equal to what the Soviet Union saw during the occupation of Afghanistan from 1979 to 1989. It's a little over 200 days. They've lost what they lost in 10 years. On top of that, the amount of helicopters and tanks and equipment they've lost is just going to hurt their economy. If you watch the news, there's different parts of Russia right now that are calling for Vladimir Putin to resign. So I honestly think in 2023 and probably beyond, that country is going to be in a lot of turmoil, and there's going to be some serious weirdness coming out of there. But you got to hope for the best at this point with them. An unstable Russia is not what we want. All right, our next one is about countries that don't believe in God, or at least they have the highest percentage of atheists living amongst them. Let's take a look. What is going on, everyone? Let's talk about religion, or the lack thereof. Today we're talking about countries with the largest portion of the population that claim to be atheists. If you don't know what atheism is, it can simply be explained as a person who doesn't believe in God or some other form of higher power. There are several flavors of atheism that I'm not going to get into. We're just broad brushing this one with people that don't believe in the big man upstairs or downstairs if you've stepped over to the dark side. I promise there will be people in the comments section just talking about the different types of atheism and how I got it wrong. They're almost like vegetarians. You ask someone if they're a vegetarian and you get a 20-minute speech on how vegetarians are like minor league vegans or serious vegetarians, and it just goes on and on. Never ask someone about if they're a vegetarian. Trust me on that one. We're going to keep this one simple and look at a worldwide study that was done a few years back. And this will be asked, so I'm just going to put it out there just so you know. In the survey, 43% of Americans fall into the atheist crowd. All right, let's take a look and see what countries are losing their religion. Number 25, Iceland. We start off this list with this Nordic island nation filled with geysers, volcanoes, hot springs, and lava fields, and not much religion. 54% of the population say they are atheists. Now, the believers on this island nation, 95% of them are Christian and 0.2% are Muslims. Those are the 2 main ones there. Back in the day, they believed in Viking gods. 24, France. Even though France has some amazing cathedrals and churches, not everyone's on board with the whole religion thing here. 55% of the French people claim they are atheists. Of the people that do believe, 63% are Christian and 7.5% are Muslim. 23, Slovenia. I don't know much about Slovenia. One thing I do know is they don't get on the religion train too much. 59% of the population claim to be atheists. Of the believers, 78.4% are Christian, 3.6% are Muslim. For this area, I really thought they'd have a higher Muslim population. Who knows? 22, Austria. Austria, much like Germany, they don't get into the religion thing too much. You'll see Germany later on this list. 59% of the Austrian residents claim to be atheists. Of the believers, 80.4% are Christian and 5.4% are Muslim. That one kind of surprised me there. I didn't think they'd have as many Muslims there, but here you have it. 21, Ireland. Blown away at this one. I come from a family that's part Norwegian, part Irish. My grandmother, my great-grandmother, my aunts, everyone, they were very religious. I just always thought this was a very religious country. And here they are, almost cracking the top 20 of atheist places. 60% of Ireland's population claim to be atheist. Of the believers, 62% are Christian, 1.1% are Muslim. And by the way, I'm only including the top 2 religions in any country, or we'd be here all week, just so you know. Number 20, Israel. Again, mind blown. This is a Jewish state. How are a bunch of people here not into religion? Now, on this one, I had to dig a little deeper because I was really blown away on this one. The study I found said 61% of Israel's population is atheist. And I got a little deeper, and there was a Israeli newspaper called Haaretz, or it's Haaretz. I think that's how you call it. But anyway, they came up with 65% of Israel is atheist. So not too far from the study I got most of the information from. But of the believers, as you can imagine, 75.6% are Jewish, 18.6% are Muslims, and 2% are Christian. 19, Latvia. Now, I don't know a whole bunch about Latvia. My son was actually stationed there for about a year when he was in the military. But I'll tell you one thing I do know, 62% don't believe in the man upstairs. Of the believers, 55.8% are Christian, 1.5% are Muslim. 18, Finland. Now, you're going to start seeing a lot from this part of the world. They're just not into religion like you might think they would be. 62% of Finland's population claim they are atheists. Of the believers, 81.6% are Christian and less than 1% are Muslim. They just really don't go for it. I imagine they're just too busy trying to stay warm. 17, Canada, or as I like to call it, the land of Doug. For some reason, I know like 6 Canadians, all named Doug. I'm not sure what the deal is with naming your sons Doug in Canada is, but it seems to be a thing. Other than the right side of the country, when you got Quebec and Montreal, they go with like Jean-Pierre and stuff like that. But 63% of Dougs consider themselves atheists. Of the believers, 69% are Christian, 2.1% are Muslim. I'm a little shocked there. I really thought they'd have a higher Muslim population, but it's only 2.1%. 16, Spain. This is another one that kind of shocked me. Spain has amazingly beautiful churches and cathedrals, and here they are. 63% of their population claim to be atheists. But of those people that believe, 78.6% are Christian, 2.1% are Muslim. Number 15, Azerbaijan. This is another country that I don't know a ton about, but I do know they're not into religion. 64% of the Azerbaijan people do not believe in the man upstairs. But of the ones that do, 96.9% are Muslim and 3% are Christian. A little bit switcheroo there compared to what we've had already. 14, South Korea. I'm not too shocked on this one. A lot of Asian countries really aren't into the whole religion thing. 5 of the top 15 are Asian countries on this list. 65% of South Korea's population say they are atheists. Of the believers, 29.4% are Christian and 22.9% are Buddhist. 13, Hong Kong. I'm over 50. There was a cartoon back in the 70s called Hong Kong Phooey. Every time I say the word Hong Kong, I want to say Phooey at the end of it. Totally racist cartoon, but we didn't know that back in the 70s. I just looked it up and it was a big part of my life. I've always remembered it, and they only did like 16 episodes and then some other smaller half episodes. Only lasts like 2 years or something. Anyway, we're talking about religion on this video, not Hanna-Barbera cartoons. And in Hong Kong, 66% of the population say they are atheists. Now, I'll give you three on this one. 14.3% of the believers say they're Christian. 13.2% are Buddhist. Now, here's a different one. 12.8% follow what is known as folk religion. If you don't know what folk religion, it's kind of an ethnic, regional religion or customs that fall under the umbrella of religion, but outside the official doctrine or practice of any other regular religion. That's kind of the definition they give you. Number 12, Germany. Germany's another one I'm a little surprised on. I mean, most of Europe has, deep roots in various religions. And yeah, things change over time, but it usually takes generation after generation after generation to really get away from a religion. And Germany seems to be a place that's cutting a few of those generations out of the equation. 66% of the German population claim they're atheists. Of the believers, 68.7% believe in Christianity, while 5.8% say they are Muslim. 11, Vietnam. Yeah, another Asian country. They're really not into religion. Now, they do have a good portion of their population that's into folk religion, but 67% say they are atheists. Folk religion, 43.5%, and Buddhist is 16.4%. Number 10, Denmark. Denmark doesn't surprise me at all. I did read a study by their government that says that 80% of the population belongs to the ELC, which stands for the Evangelical Lutheran, but only 10% of them attend services. Now, they're still part of the church, so they'll do things like funerals, weddings, confirmations, baptisms, things like that. But as far as going or really considering themselves that, only 10%. 68% of Denmark's population say they are atheists, with 83.5% making up Christianity, and 4.1% is Muslim. The Muslim population is mostly focused in Copenhagen and some of the other larger cities. Number 9, Norway. Norway is just like Denmark. Over 80% of the believers belong to the ELC, but only about 8% attend services on a weekly basis. And that's the believers. 70% of this country claim they are atheists. But when it does come to Christianity, 84.7% are Christian and 3.7% are Muslim. Number 8, Australia. So this one sort of surprised me. I don't know why. They're really not a very religious country. I just thought they would be. Don't know why. But 70% of Australia's population claim they are atheists. Of the believers, 67.3% are Christian and 2.4% are Muslim. Number 7, Estonia. Estonia is another place that I really don't know too much about. I do love their flag. They got a really cool flag, that black, blue, and white. I don't know, it just looks really cool. They're up there next to Latvia and Russia. They have a lot of atheists in this country, which I'm sure some of them are praying right now Russia doesn't decide to stop in Ukraine and start in Estonia. But 72% of Estonia's population claim they are atheists. Of the believers, 39.9% are Christian and only 0.2% are Muslim. Number 6, Belgium. Belgium isn't a big country and they're not big into religion either. So in the top 10, I've been trying to look in and find other studies to get a better grasp of what's going on in these countries, and normally the government will have some kind of statistics on things like religion and population. One thing they don't collect in Belgium is religious affiliation numbers. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But 72% of the Belgian population claims they are atheists, with 64.2% of the believers believing in Christianity and 5.9% being Muslim. Number 5, the United Kingdom. This again kind of surprised me with the family that comes from that part of the world. I just always assumed the United Kingdom was very religious. Now I feel like I should clear something up, because whenever I say the United Kingdom and then Ireland was also on there, people are all, we already said Ireland. Ireland is not part of the United Kingdom. Northern Ireland is, not Ireland. But yeah, much to my surprise, 72% of the United Kingdom claims to be atheist, while 71% of the believers are Christian and 4.4% are Muslim. Number 4, the Czech Republic. This is a beautiful country. If you've never visited, definitely go to Prague someday. It's an amazing city with great history, beautiful country. The architecture is just mind-blowing for this place. Anyway, 75% of the Czech Republic say they are atheist. Of the believers, 53.3% are Christian, 2.1% are Buddhist, and then there's a whole bunch that claim to be religious but unaffiliated. That's most of them. In case you're doing the numbers here, that's what the rest are, unaffiliated. Number 3, Sweden. Sweden, just like most of these Scandinavian countries, they're not too big on the man upstairs. I mean, for a long time, this whole part of the world was all into the Norse gods and all that stuff, and then it's like they really didn't get into anything too big after that. 78% of the Swedish population claim they are atheist, with 67.2% of the believers being Christian, 4.6% being Muslim, and a whole bunch of 1% of everything else. Number 2, Japan. Yes, see, another Asian country. I don't know what it is, but the Asian countries and, a lot of the Scandinavian countries, they're not into religion. Look at Central and South America and you will not find them near the top 25. I read one article where a Japanese man said that the Japanese people believe more in Godzilla and Pokemon than they do any other religion. I thought that was interesting. But 81% of Japan's population claim they are atheist. But of the people that do believe in some sort of religion, 36.2% are Buddhist and 1.6% falling into the Muslim category. All right, before we get to number 1, don't forget we have another channel called On This Day. There's a link down below. We'd love it if you went over there and subscribed, watched some videos, whatever. Don't forget to give this video a big thumbs up. All right, on to number 1. And number 1. China. This is an amazing stat. I mean, so many people are atheists in China that it's kind of strange. It's hard to believe that they have this many people and this many don't believe in something. 91% of China's population claim to be atheists. Yes, they've all agreed that they don't believe in this. You can't even get that high a percentage when you're offering free money. Most people are all into free money, but then there's those types who are, well, where's this money coming from? Nothing's free, da 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 da. But 91% of the people claim that they are atheists in China. Mind-blowing. But of the believers, 52.2% are Buddhists and 18.2% are folk religion. All right, so that's today's video. Now, one thing I did find interesting, some of the countries with the lowest amount of atheists are actually African countries. Again, mind-blowing. I had no idea, but we'll do that in another video. All right, let's take a look at one of everyone's favorite subjects, the most dangerous places, but this one's got a little bit of a twist. It's the most dangerous places for Americans. I believe this one was done in 2023. Let's take a look. What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to the World According to Briggs. Today is another international video. Did you know some countries are more dangerous than Detroit or a lingerie party at my cousin's ex-wife's house? Yes, it's hard to believe, I know. She's had lingerie parties. In general, the world can be a dangerous place. You could be in danger no matter where your plane lands. The thing is, some countries excel in danger, and some even bump it up a notch depending on where you hail from. If you think everyone in the world loves America and its people, you've lived a sheltered life, and I want to congratulate you for escaping wherever you were being held and now are able to watch my videos on the internet. The fact is, some countries are dangerous for everyone, especially Americans. So much so, the Department of State, some people know it as the State Department, but it's actually the Department of State, updates a report every couple weeks called the Travel Advisory. This is a report that ranks the danger level a country might have for Americans if they travel there. It has colors like a danger mood ring and goes by levels. Level 1 being blue, exercise normal precaution, all the way up to red for do not travel here. In today's video, we're looking at the top 10 level 4s and find out why. Alright, so let's see what countries you should avoid, starting with Number 10, Syria. You should not go to Syria unless you're bulletproof. That is probably the best piece of advice anyone has ever given you. Syria has been in a civil war for about 9 years now. Now, here's the fun part. It's a multi-sided civil war, so there's like 3, 4, 5 different factions fighting each other. That's always fun. That could be a problem, because you never know who's shooting at you. Let's say you're cruising with a Syrian real estate agent looking for a nice, partially bombed out duplex, and shooting starts. You won't know who it is. The State Department offers this warning. No part of Syria is safe from violence. Kidnappings by armed groups, arbitrary arrests, the use of chemical warfare, shelling, and aerial bombardment pose a significant risk of death or serious injury. The destruction of the infrastructure, housing, medical facilities, schools, and power and water utilities has also increased the hardships inside the countries. So here it is. Don't go to Syria. Number 9. Burkina Faso. The first thing I should explain is I didn't just make that up. Burkina Faso is a real country in Africa, and it is very unfriendly towards Westerners, especially Americans. It is a West African country between Mali and Ghana with about 20 million residents. About 98% of them would be considered living in poverty. There is no reason to move here unless you're a dirt road enthusiast, because they got a lot of them. If you do feel like scratching this place off your bucket list, here's what the State Department says. Terrorist groups continue plotting attacks in Burkina Faso. Terrorists may conduct attacks anywhere with little or no warning. Are there terrorists out there like, pencil me in for next Thursday, I'm going to blow up your building? Is that going on? I think they always attack with little or no warning. Targets could include hotels, restaurants, police stations, custom offices, areas in or around or near mines, place of worship, military posts, and schools. In other words, these guys don't care. They'll blow you up. Kidnappings and hostage taking are a threat throughout the country. On May 10th, 2019, a hostage rescue operation freed 4 international hostages that had been kidnapped in Burkina Faso. The government of Burkina Faso has maintained a state of emergency for most of the country. I'm sure they say most because there's parts of this country that are so dry, camels don't even like to go to. Number 8. South Sudan. South Sudan is a landlocked country in East Central Africa with a population of about 12 million people. I did a video about the worst airports in the world, and South Sudan's airport was on that list. Among the many issues this place has, the airport's restroom is a tent with a trench. I'm not even kidding. Every month or so, they move the tent and the trench someplace else. There's no indoor plumbing at the airport, along with most other places. As a Sudanese man once told me, water is for drinking, not for pooping. So I guess that's their little motto there. Anyway, here's the State Department's take on South Sudan. Violent crimes such as carjacking, shootings, ambushes, assaults, robberies, and kidnappings are common throughout South Sudan. Female foreign nationals have been victims of all kinds of bad stuff. They listed it, but I can't tell you because I don't want to get demonetized, but you can imagine what that is. Armed robberies and other violent crimes happen all the time in the streets of South Sudan, when you could find streets. An armed conflict is ongoing, including fighting between various political and ethnic groups. Weapons are readily available to the population. In addition, cattle raids throughout the country often lead to violence. They steal each other's cows, apparently. News reporting in South Sudan without the proper documentation from the South Sudanese Media Authority is considered illegal, and any journalistic work there is very dangerous. Journalists often report being harassed in South Sudan, and many of them have been killed while covering conflicts. So yeah, there's no reason to go here. Number 7, Yemen. Yemen hasn't been a tourist hotspot since, well, pretty much forever. The place kind of blows. It is a country on the Arabian Peninsula that shares a border with Oman to the east, Saudi Arabia to the north, and the Gulf of Aden to the south. Since medieval times, this place has had conflicts. The Yemen Revolution followed other Arab Spring mass protests in early 2011. The uprising was initially against unemployment, economic conditions, and corruption, as well as against the government proposals to modify the constitution so that the guy in charge's son could inherit the presidency. So, no more elections, you just give it to your son, which is kind of like a monarchy, and the people weren't going for it. In March of 2011, police snipers opened fire on a pro-democracy camp, killing more than 50 people. Good times in Yemen. Call your travel agent. Pay your life insurance first. Let's see what the State Department has to say about Yemen. Starts off pretty plainly. Do not travel to Yemen due to terrorism, civil unrest, health risks, kidnappings, armed conflict, and landmines. The U.S. Embassy in Sanaa, I think that's how you pronounce it, suspended its operations in February of 2015, and the U.S. government is unable to provide emergency services to U.S. citizens in Yemen. In other words, you're on your own, everyone. Terrorist groups continue to plot and conduct attacks in Yemen. Terrorists may attack with little or no warning. There it is again. Little or no warning. Why do they keep saying that? And they target public sites, transportation hubs, markets, shopping malls, and local government facilities. Additionally, there is a continuing threat of kidnapping, detention by terrorists, criminal elements, by non-government actors. Employees of Western organizations may be targeted for attack or kidnapping. Military conflict can cause significant destruction to the infrastructure, housing, medical facilities, schools, power, and water utilities. This limits availability to electricity, clean water, and medical care. Instability often hampers the ability of humanitarian organizations to deliver critically needed food, medicine, and water. There's also reports of landmines throughout Yemen. Cholera is present throughout Yemen as well. There's limited availability to medicine and medical supplies, and adequate medical treatment is unavailable if you get cholera. If you guys haven't picked up on it already, don't go to Yemen. Number 6, Venezuela. The US and Venezuela haven't been on the best of terms for some time now. Just last year, we unfriended them on Facebook. On March 11, 2019, the U.S. Department of State announced the withdrawal of all diplomatic personnel from the U.S. Embassy in Caracas. All services, routine and emergency, would be suspended until further notice. Now, here's the warning that the State Department gives about Venezuela. Violent crimes such as homicide, armed robbery, kidnapping, and carjacking are common in Venezuela. Political rallies and demonstrations occur often with little notice, sort of like those terrorists. Demonstrations typically elicit a strong police and security force response that includes the use of tear gas, pepper spray, water cannons, and rubber bullets against the participants, occasionally devolving into looting and vandalism. There's a shortage of food, electricity, water, medicine, and medical supplies throughout much of Venezuela. The US CDC issued a level 3 warning to avoid non-essential travel to Venezuela, and that was in 2018 due to inadequate health care and a breakdown of the medical infrastructure in Venezuela. Venezuela is in bad shape. They have been for some time, and it is getting worse. It's kind of been pushed to the back of the news channels lately because we've got other things going on, but those people are in bad shape. Don't go there. Don't be part of the problem. Number 5, Mali. Mali is a landlocked country in Africa that nobody knows much about. You probably know something about it, but what you know, you probably think isn't real, so you think you don't know anything about it. Have I confused you? Here you go. I'll explain. Mali is home to the ancient city of Timbuktu. Yes, it's real. Timbuktu is like the last city before you hit the Sahara Desert and run the risk of dying of dehydration or heat stroke. So bring sunblock and some Gatorade, and also bring some of that stuff for your lips, because when you're dying of heat stroke or dehydration, your lips are all cracked. It's just worse. It's just the worst. Here's the State Department's official warning. Don't go there. Violent crimes such as kidnappings, armed robberies are common in Mali. Violent crime is more of a concern during the local holidays and seasonal events around Bamako. Bamako is the capital city. Roadblocks and random corrupt police checkpoints are commonplace throughout the country, especially at night. Terrorists and armed groups continue plotting kidnappings and attacks in Mali, like all terrorists do. They may attack with little or no warning, again, like all terrorists do, targeting nightclubs, hotels, restaurants, places of worship, anywhere Westerners are. Due to risks to civil aviation, operations within the vicinity of Mali are restricted by the Federal Aviation Administration. You can't even fly into Mali. Number 4, Iraq. So, I shouldn't have to tell anyone this, but stay out of Iraq. It was actually safer when we were blowing this country up. State Department's warning goes like this. Do not travel to Iraq due to terrorism, kidnapping, and an armed conflict. U.S. citizens in Iraq are at high risk for violence and kidnapping. Numerous terrorist and insurgent groups are active in Iraq and often attack both Iraqi security forces and civilians. Anti-U.S. militias threaten U.S. citizens and Western companies throughout Iraq. Attacks by improvised explosive devices, IEDs, occur in many of the areas in the country, including Baghdad. On December 31st, 2019, the embassy suspended public services until further notice as a result of damage done by an Iranian-backed terrorist attack on the embassy compound. It goes on. U.S. citizens should not travel through Iraq to Syria to engage in the armed conflict there. You would face extreme personal risks such as kidnapping, injury, and death, and legal risks, arrest, fines, and expulsion. The Kurdish regional government stated that it would impose prison sentence of up to 10 years on individuals who illegally cross the border. Additionally, fighting on behalf of or supporting terrorist organizations is a crime that can result in penalties including prison time, large fines in the United States. So there's no reason to go to Iraq. Number 3, China. Okay, so everybody knows what's going on with that illness. Now, I can't say the actual name because I'll get demonetized, and I agree with this policy because if YouTube didn't, people would be sensationalizing it and using the name and probably flood YouTube with bad information. So we'll just call it the beer illness. The State Department's official statement is, do not travel to China due to the beer illness first being identified in China. On January 30th, the World Health Organization determined that the rapidly spreading outbreak constitutes a public health emergency of international concern. Travelers should be prepared for the possibility of travel restrictions with little or no advance warning. Most commercial air carriers have reduced or suspended routes to and from China. So if you're there, you're kind of stuck in a lot of cases. Those currently in China should attempt to depart by commercial means. We strongly urge U.S. citizens remaining in China to stay home as much as possible and limit contact with others, including large gatherings. Consider stocking up on food and other supplies to limit movement outside the home in the event that the situation deteriorates further. The ability of the U.S. Embassy and Consulate to provide assistance to U.S. nationals within China may be limited. So it's a bad situation, and it has the potential of getting worse, or it has the potential of just going away. Really don't know just yet. We'll find out, right? Number 2, Iran. If you haven't been watching the news since, 1970, Iran hates the United States. They hate everything we do, including women driving, women wearing what they want, dating, movies, and bowling, oddly enough. I know an interpreter who said that when he was a boy in the schools in Iran, that they would play these videos on how evil the US was, like total propaganda stuff. He said for some reason, they always showed Americans bowling. And even at a young age, him and his friends always wanted to come to America just to bowl, and they could hardly wait. Anyway, tensions have always been high between the US and Iran, and when we blew up their top general a couple months back, things got worse. Here's the State Department's warning. Do not travel to Iran due to the high risk of kidnapping and arbitrary arrests and detention of US citizens. Those present in Iran should exercise increased caution due to an outbreak of the beer illness. US citizens visiting or residing in Iran have been kidnapped, arrested, and detained on false charges. Iranian authorities continue to unjustly detain and imprison US citizens, often dual national Iranian American citizens, including students, journalists, business travelers, and academics, on charges including espionage and posing a threat to the national security of Iran. Iranian authorities routinely delay consular access to detained US citizens and consistently deny consular access to dual Iranian US citizens. So yeah, it's just a mess over there. They hate us and they do everything they can to make it difficult. And, right now there's all kinds of accusations that they've been helping plan all these different attacks on us. So yeah, stay out of Iran. And number 1, Haiti. In my life, I don't remember anything good coming out of Haiti. In recent years, the Haitian government seems to have completely lost control of the entire island. Besides the people being out of control, they've had serious earthquakes and hurricanes over the years that have just destroyed the island. Now here's the State Department's thing. Do not travel to Haiti due to crime, civil unrest, and kidnappings. Violent crimes such as armed robbery and carjacking are common in Haiti. Kidnapping is widespread. Kidnappers may use sophisticated planning or take advantage of unplanned opportunities. Victims include U.S. citizens. Demonstrations, tire burning, and roadblocks are frequent and unpredictable and can turn violent. Local police may lack the resources to respond effectively to serious criminal incidents. Emergency response, including ambulance service, is limited or non-existent. Travelers are sometimes followed and violently attacked and robbed shortly after leaving the international airport. The U.S. Embassy requires its personnel to use official transportation to and from the airport. Robbers and carjackers have attacked private vehicles stuck in heavy traffic congestion and often target lone drivers, often women driving alone. All right, up next we have our video that got the most views of all times. It was done back in 2022, February 17th is when it was uploaded, and it is the rudest countries in the world. There was a lot of comments about this one. People didn't agree with it. I went off a study. So it wasn't totally my opinion. Some of them were, because maybe I'd been to those countries and didn't have a good time and I thought they were rude, things like that. But for the most part, this was done from a study of travel professionals. Let's take a look. What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to World According to Briggs and an international video. Today we're looking at countries where tourists say the locals are rude. I read a blog about this subject where a guy said every time he went to Germany he ran across nothing but rude and unfriendly people. He listed a few other countries he felt were almost as bad as Germany, but he said Germany was the worst. So that got me thinking, and I ran a poll where I listed 40 of the most visited countries and asked travelers to pick the 3 countries they felt the locals were the most rude. I also listed the top 15 on a few different polls on the community section of this channel, and this is what we found. Number 10, the Greeks. Greece is one of the oldest countries still going. They offer tourists ancient ruins, great islands, amazing beaches, gyros, and a steady helping of F you, go back where you came from. Around 30 million people visit Greece every single year. The government and shop owners love that. The locals aren't always on board with it. They have a reputation of being rude. I don't think it's always as rude as people might think. A lot like here in the United States, Greece, they have a tendency to talk a lot with their arms and a little too close for American and let's say British standards. They get a little too close when they're talking. And I think a lot of Westerners or people from North America kind of view this as them being rude. Now, granted, like all countries, they have some rude people that are just rude, but I think a lot of their reputation comes from that. 37% of the people surveyed had Greece listed as one of the 3 rudest countries. Number 9, the Turkish. Yeah, Turkey's got kind of a reputation for having rude residents. Like Greece, they have a lot of history going on here. Istanbul, which used to be Constantinople, played a big part in the Crusades. This is where a lot of the European crusaders passed through to go to the Middle East and cause all kinds of problems. I mean, Constantinople served as an imperial capital for almost 16 centuries. All the way back to the Romans, the Byzantines, the Ottomans, they all had this place as their capital. Turkey offers a lot more outside of Istanbul. They've got a lot of history here, a lot of great things to see. Turkey sees around 50 million visitors a year. Actually, in 2019, before the pandemic, they hit 52 million. So they see a lot of people going through here, and not everyone's on board with how cool they are there. 41% of the respondents had Turkey as one of their 3 countries with the rudest locals. Number 8, Italians. I mean, how can these people be so rude? They got pasta, pizza, they got all the good food here. In my opinion, Italian food ranks right behind Mexican food. Yeah, that's just me. Maybe if I grew up in Europe, I'd feel the opposite about that, but Mexican food, then Italian food. That's how I see it. Italy has some of the most amazing cities to see. Think about it. Rome, Milan, Venice, Florence, San Marino, which actually isn't part of Italy, it's its own country. Yeah, most people don't know that Italy has a small country inside of Italy. It is San Marino, and it is east of Florence and south of Venice. Italy sees over 90 million tourists every single year, at least in the last 10 years. That's about what they see, over 90 million. That dropped down considerably during the pandemic years, but in normal times, they see about 90 million people. And a good percentage of those people apparently think the Italians are rude. Italians actually have a reputation for being rude. I mean, they didn't invent the middle finger, the Greeks did, but the Italians, they sort of perfected it. In Milan, they actually have a statue of the middle finger pointing at the Italian Stock Exchange. Not even kidding, here it is. For a country that invented banks, they really don't like bankers too much. 41% of the people listed Italians in their top 3 rudest locals. Number 7, the Spanish. This one caught me by surprise. I know quite a few Spanish people. They have never been anything but friendly and nice. But apparently, if you're a tourist in their homeland, they're not too keen about it. I was reading one travel blogger, and he said that it's mostly the younger kids, younger people, I should say, the 30 to 20 to their teens. They're the people that don't like a lot of tourists. The older people sort of like it, or at least they like the money that's being brought in from the tourists. I find this one a little strange. I don't know if it's accurate, from my experience, I should say. But apparently, if you go by the survey and the polls, the Spanish people aren't too keen on people coming to Spain. Spain sees about 70 million visitors a year, and 45% of the people surveyed had Spain as one of their 3 countries with the rudest locals. Number 6, the Chinese. Now, I couldn't tell you personally, whether this is correct or not. I'm going by the survey on this one. I've never been to China. I know some Chinese people, not very well, but the survey says that they're pretty rude to the locals. I did a little reading, and apparently you go into the rural areas and they really like you. If you get in the cities and stuff, they're kind of rude and abrupt to foreigners. But the locals in the rural areas, they're almost happy to have you. 46% of the people surveyed had China as one of the 3 countries with the rudest locals. Number 5, Americans. Yes, the United States is number 5. I know a lot of people from other countries probably just gasp. How could they be number 5? Shouldn't they be number 1? No, we're really not that rude when you're coming here to be tourists. I mean, if you end up in the wrong place, like New Jersey, you'll probably think differently of us, but for the most part, in most of the country, people are pretty decent in the tourist areas. Not just New Jersey, you might want to add Hawaii onto that. Hawaii's not too keen even about other Americans coming to that state. Now, if you consider gun violence rude, yeah, we're hella rude then, because we got a lot of that here in the United States, in case you don't know and you're from another country. That's like my advice to anyone coming to the United States from another country. Make sure you know where the dangerous neighborhoods are. I mean, any neighborhood has the potential to be dangerous, but we have some that if you don't know about them, could be a serious mistake. So keep that in mind. You should know little things like go see St. Louis. The arch is neat and all that's really cool. Don't go see East St. Louis. Don't make that mistake. Go see downtown Detroit. Don't go outside of downtown Detroit and you'll be fine. Go visit Chicago. Just don't go too far south from what they call the Loop, which is the downtown area of Chicago. Things like that. 51% of the people surveyed had the United States as one of their 3 countries with the rudest locals. Number 4, Russians. Russia is another country that has people that I think sort of get a bad rap. But because it's their culture and the way they do things, it doesn't jive with a lot of, especially Western countries and their citizens. Russians are very to the point and very blunt about everything. There's no like gray areas with them most of the time. And they don't sugarcoat much when they're talking to you. So a lot of people might think that's rude. The people that I know that have visited Russia, they're kind of 50-50 on it. Some say it was great. Some people say they were kind of rude and mean to them. So you don't know. But in the survey, 53% of the respondents had Russia as one of their top 3 countries with the rudest locals. Number 3, Germans. Yeah, Germans are rude and everybody knows it. They can't help it. They got a little that Russian thing going too, where there's no sugarcoating anything. It's very blunt, very to the point, very matter of fact. And like I said in the Russian part, that Westerners find that a little abrasive sometimes. My experience with Germans has never been good. The ones that I know, the ones that I've talked to online, they're always seem to be rude. It's like their thing. I don't know what it is. One thing I've always heard over and over, and I kind of got that vibe too, they always get that thing where they think they're better than everyone else. Now, that's an opinion by a lot of people, not like a fact. There's no arrogance metric, you know? Germany normal years sees about 40 million tourists. And 61% of the people surveyed had Germany as one of their 3 countries that they felt had the rudest locals. Number 2, the British. Now this is amazing because of all the people surveyed, the number 1 country of origin of people that said the British were the rudest were the British. Yeah, the UK says British are the absolute rudest people in other countries. It's like these people know how they are and they just own it. I've always heard the phrase ugly Americans when they're talking about Americans going to other countries and being tourists and how we're just rude and stupid and everything else like that. But apparently it's the British are even worse than us. 63% of the people surveyed had the United Kingdom in their top 3 for rudest locals. All right, before we get to number 1, don't forget at the end of this video, we have these little things where the algorithm suggests other of my videos that you should watch. Why don't you click on one and see if the algorithm's correct. All right, on to number 1. And number 1. The French. The French have a legendary reputation for being rude. There have been jokes about how rude the French are since forever. Everybody knows it. It's in jokes. They do things about how rude the French are in movies. There was a movie with Dudley Moore years ago where he played an ad executive who had like a breakdown and started telling the truth, and he created an ad that everyone loved. It showed an Italian woman cooking some pasta and said, "Come to Italy, we're nice. We're not like the French." And it showed a guy with a beret flipping the camera off. So that kind of gives you an idea. Now, don't take that as an opening because I made a reference to a movie that shows how something's a stereotype. For some reason, whenever I mention a movie, that's like someone's defense. Oh, he's basing his opinion off a movie. No, that's called an antidote. My opinion is just like the rest of the world's opinion on the French. They're frickin' rude. They got some good wine, though. You gotta love their wine. In 2018, France saw 89 million tourists. Now, their target for 2020 was 100 million, but the pandemic kind of set that sideways. We'll see if they get their 100 million here in the next couple years now that we're getting out of the pandemic. 71% of the people surveyed had France in their top 3 countries with the rudest residents. Nope. All right, our next one comes to us all the way back in 2020. So that's like 5 years ago because it came out in January of 2020. This is a pretty good one. It is the poorest countries in Europe. Let's take a look. What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to the World According to Briggs. I hope you're doing well. Today we're doing an international video about Europe. There are 750 million people living in 44 different countries that together they call Europe. Europe is right here in case you've never had a geography or history class. I watched one of those Jay Leno things years back where they asked people things on the street. They asked a bunch of people to name countries in Europe. More than a few thought Australia and New Zealand were in Europe. If you're not sure if they are, they aren't. Don't bother Googling it, I got you covered. The wealth of the different European countries vary widely. The poorest countries of Europe are usually the ones that that were affected by the collapse of the Soviet Union. Soviet Union paid a lot of these countries' bills and supplied them with a lot of food and fuel. Now they're struggling. They have been for some time. We're doing this list on GDP per capita. GDP per capita is a measure of the country's capita output that accounts for its number of people. Basically, if you divide the country's gross domestic product by the total of the population, it gives you a solid measurement of what the country's standard of living is. I know that's a lot of technical nonsense, but what it breaks down to is we're going to check out how poor these countries are. So why don't we take a look and see what countries need a side hustle, starting with number 10, Bulgaria. The GDP per capita of Bulgaria is $9,340 American. Bulgaria is a country located in southeastern Europe on the Black Sea. Bulgaria has sucked forever. When I grew up, we had a good-sized Bulgarian community where I lived that they all seemed to have left during the Soviet Union times. They never seemed happy. I also got the feeling they learned all their English from watching American soap operas. We had a Bulgarian worker at this place I worked at in high school, an auto parts place. You ask him anything, and you got an over-dramatic response. You'd go, "Hey, Orlin, can you count how many cases of oil we got today?" "My name is Orlin. I will count the cases. That is my responsibility." It was always just weird and over the top. I loved Orlin. Bulgaria's economy experienced major setbacks in the 1990s after the loss of the Soviet market. They tried to switch to a democratic government with a free market economy. It destabilized the country even more. Bulgaria fell further behind, I guess you could say. The standard of living in the country reduced by 40%, and they didn't begin a recovery till about 1998. Then the Great Recession came by in 08 and 09, and it got worse. They still haven't fully recovered from that one. 35% of Bulgaria lives in poverty. Number 9, Montenegro. The GDP per capita of Montenegro is $8,750. Montenegro is a southeastern European nation near Kosovo and Albania. And when you say Montenegro, most people think you're talking about a car Mercury made in the 1970s. I assure you, Montenegro is a country and the Montego is a chick magnet, but only if you're rocking a mullet. The Yugoslav War, the decline of industry following the breakup of Yugoslavia, and the loss of UN financial sanctions severely affected the economy of Montenegro. The economy had been on a steady growth cycle for about 10 years, and then of course, like all the other ones, the global recession hit in 2008, and it just hammered this country. 35% of the country live in poverty. Now, the northern section, it's closer to 11%, but it's pretty bad, especially in the southern part. Number 8, Serbia. The GDP per capita of Serbia is $7,243. Serbia is a landlocked nation that borders Bulgaria, Montenegro, Croatia, Bosnia, Herzegovina, and a few others. I probably don't need to keep saying this, but Serbia's already shaky economy was severely affected by the global economic crisis of 2008. This is a recurring theme in this part of the world. Actually, most other parts of the world kind of pulled out of it, not this area. Serbia isn't really raking it in with any real solid industries, especially not tourism. Has a travel agent ever suggested Serbia for the summer? There's a reason for that. The place sucks. If you do have a travel agent that suggests you visit Serbia, you might want to shop around for a different agent. The poverty rate is only 12% in Serbia, so that's really good news. It could be much worse, but the cost of living is very, very low. Number 7, Belarus. The GDP per capita in Belarus is $6,306 American. Belarus is an Eastern European landlocked nation that is bordered by Poland, Ukraine, and Latvia. It's pretty much the land between Moscow and Warsaw. Almost half the land in Belarus is covered in forest. You'd think they'd have a big timber industry. Not so much. Belarus is ranked 7th among the poorest countries in Europe for a lot of different reasons. Like all the other former Soviet countries, Belarus's economy flatlined after the Soviet Union collapsed. And the way they dealt with the economic crisis would be considered an epic fail. Between 1991 and 1995, the country was in such bad shape that 50% of the population actually lived in poverty. By 2000, they were on a hot streak. Only 41% of the country was living in poverty. Incredibly, they'd gotten it down to 8% by 2008, just before the global economy collapsed. Last time they gave up some real stats was in 2014, and they said they were below 6% poverty. A lot of people consider that a gross exaggeration. Sort of like when I say I have something in common with a ruler. But they have a low cost of living, so maybe. Number 6. North Macedonia. The GDP per capita of North Macedonia stands at $6,100. Not a lot of money. North Macedonia is one of the poorest countries in Europe. The country earned its independence in 1991 when Yugoslavia broke up. Since that time, the country has undergone some serious economic changes. North Macedonia has gradually improved its economy over the years with successful policies implemented by the government. That's all the rainbow and sunshine stuff. Here's the real stuff. In spite of all these reforms, the country has a horribly high unemployment rate of 27.3%. That's of 2016, the last time they had serious numbers. And a high poverty rate. 70% of the country's residents report that they live paycheck to paycheck or are going in debt, or actually, there's a lot of people that, go hunt and fish for their dinner. A lot of people in this country, even the ones living in the city. There is no reason to go here unless you're itching to feel like you own a time machine, because if you go here, you'll feel like you went back in time. Number 5. Bosnia Herzegovina. The GDP per capita of Bosnia Herzegovina is $5,607. Bosnia Herzegovina used to be Yugoslavia. Then they decided to have a war, and it's been a nightmare even though the war ended almost 20 years ago. The country is bordered by Croatia and Montenegro. It also shares a coastline with the Adriatic Sea, but that doesn't matter because you should never visit this place willingly. Bosnia faces the challenges of rebuilding a war-torn country from 20 years ago and recovering the economy. It is one of the poorest countries in Europe. This was once a great country. They hosted the frickin' Olympics. The political unrest of the 1990s led to a dramatic change in the economy of Bosnia. Though the economy of Bosnia and Herzegovina has gradually recovered, a large trade deficit and really high unemployment, make you wonder if this place will ever survive. 38.7% of the people are unemployed. Number 4, Albania. The GDP per capita of Albania is $5,295. Albania is a Southeast European nation bordered by Kosovo, North Macedonia, Greece, and Montenegro. When I was about 6, my uncle told me this is where all the albinos came from. Isn't that horrible? What's even more horrible is I believed him, and I believed him well past the age I should have believed that. I brought it up in a high school speech class. As it came out of my mouth, I was thinking, hold on a second, that's not true. I'm getting all embarrassed, and everyone starts laughing, and I realized they thought I was joking. So I just played it off as a joke, and it was a win. Albania is one of the poorest countries in Europe. The good news is the economy of this fine country is improving. They have a very long way to go, but it's getting better. No word on the albinos, though. Number 3, Kosovo. The GDP per capita of Kosovo is $4,500. Kosovo ranks 3rd among the poorest countries in Europe. It is a disputed territory and a partially recognized state, meaning Kosovo thinks they're a country. Not a lot of other places think they are. Kosovo was Yugoslavia's poorest province when Yugoslavia was a thing. During the 1990s, a number of dumb moves helped set them back even further, basically destroying an already weak economy. After the 2008 Declaration of Independence, remember when everyone was having that global crisis thing? They decided to make a declaration of independence. The economy showed gradual improvement since then, so maybe it was a smart move, but still, the dispute thing acts as a barrier for any quick economic growth. The good news is the country isn't in debt up to their ears like so many other countries in this part of the world. Number 2, Moldova. The GDP per capita in Moldova is $3,218. Moldova is another landlocked nation that is bordered by Ukraine and Romania. This place probably suffered more economic setbacks after the breakup of the USSR than any other country on this list or in that area. Back then, and still now somewhat, Moldova's economy faces many trade obstacles. The major objective of the newly formed Moldovan government was to pull their heads out of their butt and start making some positive changes. The government made some good changes, like removing controls on exports and backed the privatization of lands to achieve economic growth. So I would say their heads are partially out of their butts because it sort of worked. The economy in Moldova has exhibited a steady growth and recovery pattern for the last couple of years. They are still dirt poor, but they're showing signs of life. And number 1, Ukraine. The GDP per capita of Ukraine is $2,963. That's not a lot of money. The Ukraine economy was the second largest in the Soviet Union. After the USSR fell apart, the independent Ukraine made some major mistakes which plunged a large section of this country into poverty. The economy of Ukraine blows, and the people struggle to live their day-to-day lives here. Corruption, bureaucratic red tape, far too many dirt roads, a public transportation system that makes people consider buying a horse to get back and forth to work help drag Ukraine down. Despite these issues, Ukraine has managed to reduce their absolute poverty, and the poverty rate has decreased from 11.9% in 2000 to 2.3% in 2012, and it's kind of holding fast at 2.3% to this day. Ukraine is the poorest country in Europe. Alright, so that is our list today. Another international video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. We haven't given up completely on the United States. We're still going to be doing a lot of videos there. We're just mixing these ones in to kind of spice things up a little bit. Anyway, if you like what we do here, please subscribe, share it on your social media, get people to watch this channel, give it a big thumbs up, leave me a comment, tell me what you thought. Everybody have a great day. Be nice to each other. All right, up next, we have the most hated countries on the planet. That's always a good subject. There's a lot of comments about, how do you hate a country? Don't you hate the people of the country? Someone's always got to nitpick. Okay, so maybe we're not hating on the country itself or anything like that. Normally, when someone says they hate a country, it's directed at either like the geography, maybe it's a desert and maybe it's poverty, something like that that really got under someone's skin. But most of the time, the hatred is directed at their government. So that's what this is sort of about. Let's take a look. What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to The World According to Briggs and a list about the most hated countries on the planet. Yeah, people hate different countries. Several different organizations do different surveys on what country is the most hated or disliked on the planet. The Reputation Institute, Pew Research does this thing called Attitude Towards Different Countries. I looked at all the different surveys that I could find and I came up with a list of countries that most frequently show up on these studies, or surveys, whatever you want to call them. There are a lot of different reasons people from other countries may hate another country. It could be things that happened in the past or now. It could be for economic reasons or military reasons. For whatever reason, people hate. It's just a fact. This is a very interesting list. I found some on the list. They really haven't done anything horrible in decades and decades, but people hate them going back hundreds and hundreds of years. It's really strange. All right, let's see what people say are the most hated countries. Number 10, Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is an oil-rich country in the Persian Gulf, and everyone's heard of Saudi Arabia. This place is highly dominated by religious laws and go all the way to medieval punishments like stoning, lashing, amputation for thieves. Women really get a raw deal here too, with lack of most freedoms that we take for granted here in the United States that are just part of our normal life. I was reading some of their laws and thinking, why would they stop a woman from doing that? One of their laws that just baffled me, which I knew about it for a long time, I just thought it was strange, started reading about it, was women, when they go outside the home, have to cover themselves from head to toe, including their faces. And they're not allowed to go anyplace alone. They have to take a male relative with them. Could be a brother, could be their husband, whatever. I'm sure that gets old quick for both the woman and her brother, who every time she's got to go to the store, if her husband's working, she's got to call her loser brother to come over and escort her to the store. They got a whole bunch of other reasons that rub outsiders the wrong way here. And that's what gets them on lists like this. Most tourists will tell you that to stay away from this place because it's kind of boring to visit. Number 9, Turkey. Turkey has had a love-hate relationship with the world for centuries. Turkish people are great. I know a few of them. All of them are wonderful people. What's putting them on the list, according to several sources, is their current government, and actually their past government when they were the Ottomans. When you go way back, Turkey is hated because of the Armenian genocide. The massacre was carried out by the Ottoman Empire and resulted in the deaths of 1.5 million people. Armenians, mostly. If you don't know the Ottoman Empire, it's probably because you're from the United States. We kind of just brush over it in our world history, but the Ottoman Empire was basically big in this area and it all came from Turkey. And I just totally broad brushed that again, but that's give you the idea what's going on there. Although the massacre is widely known, it is still denied by the Turkish government. It's like they know it happened, everyone else knows it happened, but if they don't admit it, it didn't happen. It's weird. Number 8, Iran. I know many Persians. I worked in Beverly Hills for a lot of years and it's filled to the brim with Persians. Like Turkey, the people are kind, decent, very smart, and friendly. It's their government. It supports terrorism around the world, has horrible human rights record, keeps threatening the world with nukes, and it likes to piss off the most powerful nations on the planet. The people are great though, and it's not just the United States they like rubbing the wrong way. Everyone. If you're a major power in this world, Iran's gotten under your skin at some point. Number 7, India. If any country excels in discrimination, it's India. This is one of the main reasons people hate this place. The Indians believe that hating you for your color, race, gender is perfectly a normal thing. Now, I'm not saying all of them. This is just a general feel. I'm sure you could run into a lot of really nice Indians. This, as you can imagine, puts a bad taste in a lot of people's mouth, and it kind of keeps them away from visiting India. The country isn't safe, especially for women. They are cracking down on this, but it isn't terribly rare to find out that some woman was attacked by a group of men. For a while there, it seemed to be happening like every week. I mean, brutal stuff too. Not like touching on the bus or something like that. It was ugly. On top of that, they aren't the best neighbors to other countries around them. They have a really bad reputation for that. Number 6, the United Kingdom. Yes, believe it or not, the United Kingdom is hated by a lot of people, and it's not so much as what's going on now, they have a terrible past. It's thought by many around the world that the UK is extremely greedy, and it ruled about a quarter of the earth at one point. It was one of the first in the world to bring in a slavery system. It encouraged civil wars, oppressed and looted many countries, and is responsible for the division and destruction of several countries in different continents around the world, and still involved in most of the major wars that happen on the planet. But if you go way back, I mean, look at anything to do with history, especially here in the United States, you could tell England was they were kind of a-holes. And the arrogance they had back in the day about it was just incredible. One of the best scenes, there's a movie called Last of the Mohicans, and Daniel Day-Lewis is just like this scout woodsman, and this British officer, he saves him. And then he's all, how is it you came across this war party of Native Americans that were attacking the British? And he goes, well, we were heading to Kentucky. He's all, why are you heading to Kentucky? All of our scouts are heading to someplace else. And he goes, well, I ain't one of your scouts. And he just, the British officer's demeanor was like, what do you mean? He's all, yeah, I'm just not doing that stuff. Great movie though. One of the reports I read, there's a big problem with the British. Obviously, they were in India for a very long time, and I don't know all the ins and outs of it, but it seems very interesting, but it's a little more time consuming than I wanted to get into. They say the UK destroyed India and ruined its education system. What'd they do, like steal all the teachers? What went on there? I gotta read about that. Number 5, China. China has a lot of people, and they execute a staggering amount of them. They have forced labor camps, ugly history, and cheap exports. They've been accused of currency manipulation and have decided that the island of Taiwan belongs to them. There's always something going on between those two. Some of their low-cost products include medicine and food. On a few occasions, they've decided to use materials that are less expensive so they could drive up profits, make the product cheaper. The downside is this has caused some deaths. That type of thing has gone on for decades with them. So many times they found out some toy that was inspected before, all of a sudden they switched it out to having lead-based paint or something like that because it's cheaper on a kid's toy. As you can imagine, all those things have gotten them on this list. Number 4, Israel. The Israeli people and the Palestinian people have been going at each other's throats for decades and decades. They fire rockets at each other from across the border. The politics and the drama that has gone on here for, like I said, decades and decades is just far too complicated to cover in a 10-minute video. But whenever you have warring neighbors, the one that's usually doing the most damage is the more powerful one, which brings on a lot of hatred. And that's part of Israel's problem. I mean, there's a ton that goes into this, but basically the war that they've had with the Palestinian people and the fact that they're a Jewish nation surrounded by Muslim nations probably doesn't help matters either. Number 3, Russia. Russia has a history of being aggressive to its neighbors, not just in military terms, economics, hacking, forcing a bunch of countries to join the Soviet Union, and before you say it, yes, some went willingly. At least the people in charge went willingly. It's really hard to find average Joes from the old Soviet Union that were on board with this whole operation. Russia likes to create conflicts between major nations of the world, which is designed to be beneficial to Russia. They like to kill people that disagree with them, no matter what country the person happens to be standing in. You know, like Russians go someplace else. They've been talking to the media bad about Russian government. Next thing you know, they've been poisoned with uranium or something weird like that. They're right now in the news because they have jailed an opposition leader that's been on a hunger strike. This isn't the first time they've done that either. All those things and some other things make Russia one of the most hated countries on the planet. Number 2, the United States of America. Yeah, you heard me. My country, our country, if you're watching from the United States, is the second most hated country in the world. Now, it's hard to believe if you're from the country, much like if you're from Russia, you're probably wondering why people would hate Russia. That's just how things are. We're kind of designed to be that way. The United States of America is hated by many because of its vast military and economic power over the rest of the world. And that's just a fact. We've been involved in so many different conflicts which have just angered people from the areas and in the countries that the conflicts happened in. There are a lot of cases wondering why we got involved. You would probably have to go back to the Korean War and World War II to find a time that we were truly justified by going to war there, and the people are probably happy with it 90% of the time. I mean, the people from those countries. But considering we've been involved in all these conflicts, we are one of the wealthiest countries on the planet, and we have the largest military, it's hard not to be hated by third world countries because of that. There are so many other things, for all these really, not just the United States, but for all these countries, there's thousands of other reasons people might hate that country, and I'm sure we're going to see a lot of them in the comment section below. Keep in mind, before you tell me I forgot something or I didn't include something, this is a 10-minute video. I'm not going to get to everything. I'm just kind of giving you an idea. But it is a very interesting subject. It's worth doing some reading on. And before we get to number one, don't forget we have another channel called On This Day. There is a link down below. We'd love it if you went over there, watch a couple videos, maybe subscribe. All right, on to number one. And number one. North Korea. Who didn't see this one coming? When you put as much effort into hiding what is going on in your country as North Korea does, what's going on isn't good. North Korea has been a big pain in the ass to everyone for a very long time. We know their people are starving, jailed, executed, they disappear in the middle of the night, and they're subjected to an insane propaganda program. They're told that their leader doesn't have to use the restroom because he works so hard for the North Korean people that he burns off all the calories he takes in, so he never creates any waste. They also tell the people of North Korea that he has to take phone calls from other countries to solve problems that other countries can't figure out. They also have their own Netflix knockoff called Man Bang. I'm not kidding. It's called Man Bang. I don't even know how to explain they came up with that name, but it doesn't mean what it sounds like to Americans. I'm sure it means something different to them. This is a streaming service that has 3 channels, 2 of which are government news channels filled with nonsense, and 1 channel that shows government-approved movies only. Those who live in the country suffer from restrictions of freedom as their internet access is heavily censored, poor infrastructure, low standard of living, and the reason they're all poor and their infrastructure is crumbling is because they put all their money towards nuclear weapons. This is an obsession with the North Korean government. It threatens the world with nuclear war like on a weekly basis. They have an aggressive attitude towards neighboring countries, and this has caused them to be pretty much isolated from the rest of the world. And people go on to believe that they're just totally evil, which I'm sure the people are just fine. It's just their government is just whacked. The outside world knows very little of what's going on in North Korea. Every once in a while we'll get someone that defected over, they finally got out of the country, and they just tell us horrible things. I remember there was this soldier that jumped across the border not too long ago. He was starving. He had seeds from trees in his stomach that he just couldn't get enough food, so he was actually eating these big seeds that weren't digested, and it was kind of sad. All right, that's today's list. Hope you guys got some information out of it. Hope you guys enjoyed it. It's kind of weird, and it's really weird to have to say that, yeah, the United States is one of the most hated countries on the planet. I love my country. It's just, I had to go by what the survey said, trying to give you guys the most accurate information I can. Don't hate the messenger. All right, everyone, have a great day. Be nice to each other. All right, here's one we just did not too long ago. It's the fastest dying countries in 2024. That's when we released it. It's actually 4 countries that are collapsing in 2025 or after that. When we say collapsing, we usually mean the government is going to collapse. Now, the government in France is still running, but their actual government, almost like the party that ran them, they collapsed. And so they had this other weird thing. I don't understand their politics all the way. But that's what this one was all about. Let's take a look. Welcome to the Geopolitical Hunger Games. Today we're taking a first-class ticket on the Meltdown Express to explore the top 10 countries that are free-falling faster than my willpower near a pizza buffet. From economies imploding like a bad souffle to governments crumbling under the weight of their own genius ideas, this list has it all. Grab your popcorn because these nations are making history in the how not to run a country category. Just a heads up on this, I had France on the list at number 3, all recorded and ready to go, but I woke up this morning and it already happened. Their government collapsed. So today we're looking at the countries that are more than likely going to collapse in the next few years. Got it? Get it? Good. Let's take a look. Number 10, Venezuela. Oh, Venezuela, the land of arepas, Angel Falls, and crippling hyperflation. Once one of the wealthiest countries in Latin America, it's now a cautionary tale for how not to run an oil-rich nation. Life in Venezuela is like a never-ending Black Friday sale, except the shelves are empty and you're trading cigarettes for toilet paper. The minimum wage is so low it's practically a dare, and yet somehow people still manage to dance the salsa and crack jokes. If resilience was a sport, Venezuelans would take gold every single time. Why the collapse? Years of economic mismanagement, corruption, and an over-reliance on oil have left the country teetering. Add in a government that treats democracy like a distant cousin they don't talk to anymore, and you've got a full-blown disaster. So their president, Maduro, he's a piece of work. The government is collapsing, the economy is trash, the people are on really bad shape. He decides to release a video of servants serving him big meals with his family and smoking a cigar and basically showing the people how good he's living. What the purpose for that is, I have no idea. That's what a world leader does when he's trying to start an uprising against himself. Venezuela's full collapse is going to come in the form of some kind of military takeover, a coup. One way or another, Maduro's going to end up in handcuffs. I almost guarantee. Number 9, North Korea. North Korea is the world's most mysterious hermit kingdom, where propaganda is the only reliable export, and the citizens are forced to live in what's essentially a dystopian Truman Show. Remember that show with Jim Carrey? The cracks in this isolated fortress are becoming harder to plaster over, even with the government's trademark denials. Life in North Korea is Orwellian to the max. Citizens scrape by on meager rations while the leadership splurges on missile tests, statues of themselves, and things of that nature. The power outages, famine, and oppression are so routine they almost feel like someone's scheduling them. Yet somehow Kim Jong-un keeps convincing everyone that life outside of North Korea is worse. Spoiler alert, North Korea, it's not. Why the collapse? Brutal regime, international sanctions, and a populace that's increasingly aware that the rest of the world isn't actually a fiery hellscape. Now, from what I've read, it's almost like their biggest supporter, which is China and then followed by Russia, is kind of tired of North Korea themselves. And North Korea has been on the verge of collapsing for quite some time. I just think these days they're starting to get more information and the end is coming sooner than we think. But Kim Jong-un has such a grip on this country, he might be able to stay in power for a while, but I don't think so. Number 8, Yemen. If war-torn were a brand, Yemen would be its brand ambassador. Years of civil war, foreign intervention, and a humanitarian crisis so dire that even the word catastrophe feels insufficient have left the country in shambles. Life in Yemen is like being trapped in a video game where the difficulty level is always set on impossible. Food shortages, constant bombings, and the collapse of the infrastructure means that every day is a struggle for survival. Yet amidst the rubble, Yemenis somehow maintain their dignity and hope, which is frankly superhuman at this point. Why the collapse? A toxic mix of a Saudi-Iranian proxy war, internal division, and international neglect. Yemen is basically the world's problem child and no one wants to deal with it. They just want to keep it out of the way. They do have a government, barely, but I think it's on the verge of collapsing, probably within the next 3 years. Number 7, El Salvador. El Salvador is like the rebellious teenager of Central America. Small, crappy, and making questionable life choices. Its president has bet big on Bitcoin, which might just be the most El Salvadorian thing ever. Meanwhile, the country struggles with crime, poverty, and an economy that's about as reliable as a lottery ticket. Life in El Salvador feels like a mix of crypto bro dreams with real-world struggles. Sure, you can pay for everything with Bitcoin, but you gotta hope the Wi-Fi's working. It's pretty bad when you can't buy anything or pay anyone because the Wi-Fi's out. But outside the trendy cafes, most people are just trying to scrape by, dealing with gang violence and a government that treats democracy like an optional accessory. Why the collapse? Gang wars, economic mismanagement, and the fact that pinning your country's hopes on Bitcoin is the geopolitical equivalent of you only live once, or YOLO as the kids call it. If the experiment fails, El Salvador could end up as a cautionary tale for every country that ever thought, hey, what if we let Reddit run our economy? Most experts believe that El Salvador is going to collapse hard in the next 3 to 5 years. Number 6, Myanmar. Myanmar's like a beautiful house on fire, rich in culture and resources, but plagued by a military that's so power-hungry it makes Game of Thrones look like a fairy tale. The country has been sliding into chaos ever since the 2021 coup. This is a really strange country. Their capital city is a mess. I mean, not in a bad way, in a way that it is the same size, roughly, as London and Shanghai. London has almost 9 million people living in the city alone, with the metro area being almost 15 million, while Shanghai has a population of almost 25 million. Naypyidaw is the capital city of Myanmar, and it has less than 1 million residents. They also have 10-lane highways. They have hotels that have thousands of rooms that have never been used. They have homes built but never used. If you work in the capital city, they give you a home. The home has a colored roof depending on what ministry you work for. Maybe you're working for Parliament, that is actually a red roof. If you're working for the Ministry of Health, it's a blue roof. Green is the Ministry of Agriculture, and it goes on. It's just weird. If you go visit, about 90% of the people you see are actually workers because this city is manicured perfectly, like you went to Disneyland type of maintenance. Life in Myanmar feels like a dystopian mashup of protests, arrests, and internet blackouts. The people are fighting for democracy while the military responds with a level of brutality that suggests they read Orwell's 1984 and thought it was an instruction manual. Why the collapse? A coup that destroyed years of progress, widespread violence, and a population growing more desperate day by day. The military's iron grip is strong, but even iron rusts. Number 5, Argentina. Argentina, the land of tango, world-class beef, and an economy that's been doing the cha-cha off the financial cliff for decades. Life in Argentina is a masterclass in adaptability. Inflation isn't just a problem, it's a way of life. Prices change faster than you can say Buenos Aires, and yet the Argentinians somehow manage to make every crisis look like a fiesta. Why the collapse? Well, chronic mismanagement, a debt crisis that could fill a library with overdue notices, and political leaders who keep solving problems by kicking them down the road. Argentina's economy feels like a telenovela, dramatic, unpredictable, and oddly addictive to watch. The real kicker? Argentina always pulls itself back from the brink, only to trip over its own policies a couple years later. At this point, the peso value is so low it could be used as monopoly money, and every election feels like a last-ditch effort to steer the ship away from an iceberg. Spoiler alert, it never works. Number 4, Libya. Libya is like a car with no driver, speeding down a hill towards a cliff. After the fall of Gaddafi, the country descended into chaos, with the rival factions fighting for control and the citizens caught in the crossfire. Now, if you don't remember the Arab Spring, it started in about 2011, and it was a series of anti-government protests, uprising, and armed rebellions that spread across much of the Arab world in the early 2010s. It began in Tunisia in January of 2011. The guy that had been running the country for 24 years stepped down. In February of 2011, same thing happened in Egypt. That guy had been running the country for 24 years as well. Then came Libya. Muammar Gaddafi had been running the show for 42 years, and it was a long drawn-out thing where they started protesting, and there was all kinds of new laws put in place, and things came to a head when in September of 2011, they found a mass grave of protesters in Tripoli. On October 20th, 2011, Muammar Gaddafi decided to make a break for it and leave this capital city and his palace. Well, the rebels got a hold of him. It didn't end well. He died that same day. Now, Libya has been trying to pull it together since all this happened. I mean, it was kind of a mess for some time. Life in Libya is a paradox. It's a nation with vast oil wealth, yet most people live in fear and poverty. Militia checkpoints, kidnappings, and blackouts are part of daily life. Somehow, Libyans keep going, proving that even in a failed state, life finds a way. Why the collapse? Well, with no centralized government and a constant tug-of-war between rival factions, Libya is a prime candidate for total disintegration. Add foreign interference, and the collapse seems like a foregone conclusion. Number 3, Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe is the poster child for how to ruin a perfectly good country. Once the breadbasket of Africa, it is now synonymous with hyperinflation, corruption, and economic despair. Thanks to Mugabe. He was the president of Zimbabwe from 1987 to 2017. At 93, they decided it was time for him to hang it up. He should have hung it up decades before, but you can't have everything, right? These days, life in Zimbabwe is a roller coaster of shortages, fuels, cash, electricity, you name it. There's a shortage. Yet people remain unbreakable, cracking jokes and making do with what little they have. If sarcasm were a currency, Zimbabwe would be billionaires. Why the collapse? Decades of mismanagement, rapid corruption, and a government that treats its citizens like ATMs. Unless there's a miracle, Zimbabwe's future looks really bleak. Number 2, Syria. Syria is the textbook definition of a collapsed state. Years of civil war, foreign intervention, and a government that treats its people like cannon fodder have left the country in ruins. Life in Syria is a haunting mix of survival and sorrow. Bombed out cities, refugee camps, and a constant fear define everyday existence. Yet Syrians hold on to what little hope they can, proving that even in the darkest times, humanity endures. I mean, these people have been going through a lot for quite a while. Why the collapse? Well, the civil war seems endless, a fractured society, and a government more interested in clinging to power than rebuilding. Syria's collapse is less looming and more already happening. Now, before we get to number 1, there's an argument that the United States can be on this list. I don't think so. I mean, the United States has a horseshoe shoved up its butt or something. We always seem to pull out of whatever free fall we're in. As I was researching this, I found more and more experts think that the United States are one of the top 10 states that's about to collapse. I don't see it that way. All right, before we get to number 1, if you haven't subscribed, now's a good chance to subscribe. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button, give the video a big thumbs up, and leave me a comment. Tell me what you thought about this video. What country do you think should have been on the list? And I already know a whole bunch of you are going to put the United States because the political system has turned us jaded against our own country. All right, on to number 1. And number 1, Russia. Surprise, surprise. And I know a lot of people are going to say, what about Ukraine? Ukraine's pretty much collapsed, but Russia makes the list. Surprise, the Great Bear might be stumbling towards the abyss. Between its disastrous war in Ukraine, crippling sanctions, and a leadership that treats dissent like a personal insult, Russia is teetering. Life in Russia is increasingly a tale of two realities. The wealthy elite who live in gilded bubbles, and the average citizen scraping by under an increasingly authoritarian regime. The propaganda machine is working overtime, but cracks are starting to show, even in the motherland. Why the collapse? Overreach, economic isolation, and a population that might not stay silent forever. Russia's collapse would be dramatic, messy, and let's be honest, highly entertaining for anyone watching from the sidelines. And there you have it, the grimly humorous tour of the world's most likely candidates for collapse. Let's just hope we're wrong. I really hope we are. I'd like to see every country flourish and their citizens be happy. It'd be wonderful. Never seems to pan out that way. Maybe in Switzerland. But over the next few years, get some popcorn ready to go, just in case we can watch it all on the news. All right, the next one we have is the fastest dying country. This one was based on population decline. That, you know, they're not having enough kids and just things like that. So the country's kind of dying. The population is dropping. And if it continues the trend, they're going to have a hard time, you know, I guess taxing people and having employees to work. And it's a downward spiral. So this one came out in 2023. It was for 2024. Let's take a look. Today we're looking at countries that are losing population and are expected to continue to decline for years to come, sort of like they're dying. Is this the end of these countries? No. Will they look drastically different in decades to come? Yes, if something doesn't change. There are several reasons a country might be losing population. One of the biggest reasons for this is people deciding not to have kids or maybe just having one child. Even though it's not on this list, the United States has seen a slowdown in growth due to more people choosing not to have kids. Our rate peaked around the 1960s. But other than a few spikes like during COVID-19, we've been trending downwards in our population. We haven't gone into the negative yet,
but that could happen really soon, probably within the next decade or two. Today we're looking at the rate these countries are losing population and what is predicted for these countries over the next 30 years. Got it? Get it? Good. Let's take a look. Number 10, Japan. Japan has been slowing their growth for some time now. They adopted, I guess I don't know if you want to call it a trend, but a theory, I don't know, whatever. Quality over quantity. I come from an Irish-Mexican neighborhood, and most of the families there have the idea that have as many kids as you can, at least one of them's got to work out right. The Japanese figure they'll just have one, and they'll focus all their energy on that child, and, hopefully he'll turn out pretty good, or she'll turn out pretty good. Japan's never really been big on having a bunch of kids per family. Japan has the highest percentage of aging population in the world, with 28.2% of the people currently age 65 or older. The country's fertility rate is 1.3 children per woman, and the life expectancy at birth is 82 years old. All these factors contribute to their shrinking population. Now, this is not good. They have growing economic pressure to maintain a certain lifestyle, and they're sort of discouraged from expanding their families. Japan's current population is 125.7 million, and it's projected to decrease to 119 million by 2030 and eventually to 73 million by 2100. The population decline between 2020 and 2050 is predicted to be down 16.30%. Annual population change is minus 0.40. Number 9, Romania. Romania used to be quite active when it came to population growth. Sometime after World War II, they just slowed it all down. Since joining the European Union in 2007, Romania has witnessed a significant exodus of its citizens to Western Europe. This surge and the lower than normal fertility rate has kind of messed up their growth. It's called their replacement level, and their replacement level sucks right now. Romania's fertility rate stands approximately 1.6 children per woman, leading to an average annual population decline of 0.9%. Here's the numbers. The population decline between 2020 and 2050 is supposed to be 15.50%, and like I'd said, the annual population change is 0.90. Number 8, Belarus. We never talk about Belarus on this channel. I don't think I've ever talked about Belarus on this channel, actually. And I've done over 1,000 videos. And before you do, stop typing. I know 95% of my videos are done about the United States, but I have done some international videos, and Belarus never seems to show up. Anyway, in 2023, Belarus saw a rise in the average age of its people. Basically, there's more older folks around these days. The shift happened because not many babies are being born in Belarus, and a lot of the working age folks are leaving the country. This whole situation is really messing up the country's population growth rate. Besides that, there's also some political drama and economic uncertainty going on in Belarus, making even more people want to leave for a more stable environment. Health issues are making things complicated in Belarus. There are many more people dying, and problems with alcohol aren't helping the situation either. All those things combined are kind of showing a bleak outlook for Belarus. The population decline between 2020 and 2050 is predicted to be 15.33%. Their annual change is about minus 1%. That's expected to drop a little bit in the coming years, but they'll still be losing. Number 7, Croatia. Ever since Croatia joined the European Union in 2013, there's been a noticeable trend of many Croatians deciding to leave their homeland. This phenomenon can be attributed to a couple key factors. First, let's talk about the unemployment situation. Currently, Croatia's unemployment rate is quite high, at about 6.5%. This means that there's a significant portion of the population struggling to find jobs and secure income. When people can't find work or fear of losing jobs, it often leads them to consider opportunities elsewhere in the EU. Another issue they have for the people that do have jobs, they've had stagnant wages for some time. Now, their cost of living isn't climbing as fast as a lot of other countries, but it's still outpacing their wages. It's too bad that people are leaving there. I'm sure it kills them because Croatia is a beautiful country. Their population decline from 2020 to 2050 is predicted to be 18%. Currently, their annual population change is 0.60%, but that obviously is expected to climb here in the coming years. Number 6, Moldova. Moldova is going through a pretty rough time when it comes to its population. They've been losing a lot of people, and mostly it's because of money problems. They're just kind of broke. There aren't many good jobs in Moldova, and the country doesn't make a lot of money compared to other places in Europe. So a bunch of folks from Moldova have left to find better opportunities elsewhere. In fact, the World Bank says that in 2023, around 25% of the people who should be working in Moldova were actually living in other countries. This has caused a big drop in the number of people who can have babies, which is why the birth rate is going down in Moldova. It's not just that nobody's having kids, they're all having kids in other countries. More and more of the people that are still in Moldova are older and they're not having any more kids, and a lot of them aren't working anymore. The population decline by 2050 is supposed to be 16.70%. Currently, their annual population change is minus 0.9%. Number 5, Albania. Albania's population has been going through some changes lately. Instead of growing, it's actually been shrinking over the last 10 years or so. The number of babies being born has also been going down, but it's still a bit higher compared to other European countries. In 2023, the average number of children a woman had in Albania was 1.6%. 10 years ago, it was 1.9. Most European countries are seeing around 1.5 right now. One other reason for the population decline is that more and more people are leaving the countryside and moving into the cities, both inside and outside of Albania. Albania is a very rural country. This shift from rural areas to urban ones is playing a part in the overall trend of the population decline. It's just going to get worse because they have a very old population. And when all your young people are leaving for other countries to go to other cities for work or whatever, and the older people are getting older and they're passing away, it really cuts down on your population in a big way. These people need to have a baby boom or something. The population decline from 2020 to 2050 is predicted to be 15.8%. Currently, their annual population change is minus 1.3%. Number 4, Serbia. Serbia is another country in Eastern Europe that is just beautiful. It's actually Southeast Europe. I was on a cruise not too long ago, and one of the girls working on there, she was from Serbia. She was a bartender there, and we're talking to her. She spoke 4 languages. She was only like 23 or 24. It was very interesting that her family, including her, they all chip in to pay for her brother to go to medical school. Then once he goes through it, they all chip in to send her to her school, and I forget what she said she was going for. I think engineer or something like that. Smart enough. But now I think about it, she was awfully friendly, and if you ever meet an engineer, they're usually a little awkward. So who knows? But it's a beautiful country, beautiful people. They're just losing population. Serbia's population drop, again, is because of money worries and the change in how people live. You see, young folks in Serbia nowadays are more into building their careers and their personal growth before they start families. And a lot of times, that means going out of Serbia to get an education, to get your career going. They always seem to come back, which I wouldn't say is unusual, but they do that more here than other Eastern or Southeastern European countries. Most of the time, they get out and they stay out. Also, Serbia has a big health problem. Lots of people are dying from disease like heart problems and cancer, and that's making the population go down even more. The 2020 to 2050 estimate is they will drop their population by 18.9%. That's a lot of people. Their annual population change right now is 1.10%. Number 3, Bosnia and Herzegovina. Yes, there's an and there. I've had this discussion with people where they think it's just Bosnia-Herzegovina. No, it's Bosnia and Herzegovina. Back in the 90s, this is one of the places you can get stationed with the United States military. They'll send you to Bosnia and Herzegovina. I'm sure they still have some personnel there and some assets, but I don't know if it's as big a thing as it used to be. In Bosnia and Herzegovina, the drop in population has been a big issue for quite some time, and it goes back to the aftermath of the 1990s conflict. That war caused a lot of people to lose their lives and forced many others to leave their homes, and those scars still affect how many people live in this country to date. On top of that, the country has a complicated way of running things politically and economically, which makes things pretty unstable. This instability makes it tough for other countries to want to invest money in Bosnia and Herzegovina. This, of course, makes it hard for the economy to grow, which indirectly affects how many babies are born here. People will pull back from having kids if they're having a problem figuring out where their next meal is for themselves and any current kids they do have. The estimated decline from 2030 to 2050 in Bosnia, again, is 8.20%. Their annual population change currently is minus 1.2%. Number 2, Ukraine. Yeah, you can imagine that they're losing some population as we speak. As of early 2023, Ukraine has seen a drop in its population, and there are a couple of big reasons behind this. First off, it's the ongoing conflict in the eastern part of the country and the annexation of Crimea, which can cause a lot of people to leave their homes and even lose their lives. This has had a direct impact on the country's population numbers, obviously. A lot of people have died over there in the last 2 years, and it's pretty sad. On top of the war, Ukraine has another major problem to deal with, big health issues. They've got one of the highest rates of HIV and AIDS and related illnesses in Europe. And it's hitting their younger folks even more these days. They're in the prime of their reproductive years, and they got AIDS, HIV, they're not going to have kids. They're out of the kid market once they find out. So all of these factors are affecting Ukraine's population in a significant way, and they're not going to recover from this in our lifetime, I promise you. Their 2020 to 2050 prediction is they'll lose 19.50% of their population. Their annual population right now is 14.2%. And number 1, Bulgaria. Bulgaria's population is shrinking, and shrinking really fast, faster than the rest of the world. This is mainly because a lot of people are dying and not many babies are being born. Some of the reasons for this high death rate are the fact that many Bulgarians smoke and drink a lot. Another problem is young people are leaving Bulgaria because they can't find good jobs and the living conditions aren't great in a lot of places. This also contributes to the population going down. I've always found Bulgaria to be a very interesting country. I've never been to Bulgaria. I wouldn't mind, but I think it would be interesting. It's a beautiful country. The 2020 to 2050 prediction for the population of Bulgaria is they're going to lose 22.50% of their population. Their annual population change currently is minus 6.2%.
So I started on this journey of researching kidnappings in different countries. The stories, the situations, and the reasons people get kidnapped is a rabbit hole I don't advise you going down. The definition of kidnapping is this: the action of abducting someone and holding them captive. People get kidnapped hundreds of times a day around the world, and it's something that's increased in frequency over the last 3 decades. The numbers keep climbing so much so that most countries have stopped reporting the numbers. Some stopped way back in the early 2000s. So as you can imagine, that made it kind of hard to do serious research on the subject. Different organizations have different studies, and they've all done research, and they all have different numbers. Number 2 on this list showed up in every single one of the studies that I read, and one study said that about 2,000 people get abducted every year or kidnapped from this country. Another one said it was around 6,000, and another one said it was about 14,000. And that's not a one-off, that's how they were with just about every country. So I decided that today's video is just going off what the US State Department says. 9 of these countries are what the Department of State considers level 4 most dangerous, and they carried the nice little warning of do not travel. And they're all known for a high rate of kidnappings. One on this list is only at level 2, but they've got a serious kidnapping problem right now. And the State Department warns about that. Got it? Get it? Good. Let's take a look. Number 10, Haiti. Haiti isn't much for political stability. They never have been. It's not how they roll. Haiti takes up about 30% of the island of Hispaniola. The other side is the Dominican Republic. And this island is thought to have been inhabited since about 5000 BC by different groups of Native Americans that arrived from Central and South America. There's always been some kind of turmoil, and they've had independence and they haven't. Back from 1492 to 1625, the Spanish ruled them, then the French were there, then they had a Haitian Revolution, then they were occupied by the United States for almost 20 years, and that's when the fun began. Things started getting crazy sometime after the United States left. Matter of fact, at one point, in 1 year, they had 4 different presidents. And then they finally got a guy named Papa Doc, and Papa Doc decided after he got in office, he would be president for life. Here's the thing, he was the president for life. His life, which ended in 1971, and then his son took over, who they called Baby Doc. It is estimated that during the time that the father and son duo ran Haiti, 40 to 60,000 Haitians were killed by the government. Over the years, they've had a lot of chaos and turmoil, and they actually had a really bad earthquake in 2010, which kind of made the place a little more lawless than it already was. Different organizations have kind of joined forces to try and get Haiti under control, including the United States. In 2010, after the earthquake, the New York City Police Department sent a team of veteran officers to Haiti to assist in rebuilding their police force. They gave them specialized training in investigation techniques and strategies to improve their anti-kidnapping personnel. It was so bad they had to send cops from New York to teach them how to save their people from getting kidnapped. Here in 2022, it's still bad, and it's number 10 on this list. Number 9, Brazil. Brazil's had a problem with kidnappings for a very long time. They have different types of kidnapping, and the one that's most popular in Brazil is called express kidnapping. This is one where they abduct you and then demand a certain amount of money for your release. Usually a small amount just to get the process over and done with. Make enough cash, but not so much that someone would want to get the authorities involved. Usually it happens with abducting someone off the street, forcing them to take money out of their ATM machine, or calling a family member and forcing them to take money out and bring it to them. One that's really popular in Brazil is cab drivers that are working with a gang or a group of people. They'll pick up someone, they'll drive them to a spot, and when they get to that spot, let's say it's a stop sign or something like that, there are people waiting there for them, and they'll get in on each side of the cab, and the person's stuck between them, and they've been kidnapped. Brazil's a beautiful country with amazing people. You just got to be very aware of where you're going. The State Department suggests you reconsider traveling here. Number 8, Iraq. Iraq's had a problem with this long before any of the wars started there. During the times of Saddam Hussein, they had one type of kidnapping that was very popular. It's called enforced disappearance. This is a secret abduction and imprisonment of a person by the state or political organization. Saddam Hussein and his people were really big on this one. People used to get snatched off the street on a regular basis. Then after the wars and these days, it's different militia or terrorist groups that are doing it too, civilians or members of other groups. Different organizations have different opinions on what's going on in Iraq, but most of them agree that this happens quite a few times a day in Iraq. Number 7, Libya. This one is sort of a way of life for them. They've had a few different types of kidnappings over the years. They had the enforced disappearances and political kidnappings when Muammar Gaddafi was in charge of that shit show. And these days they have their fair share of express kidnappings. But with Gaddafi gone, the enforced disappearances haven't changed. It's just being done by several groups nowadays instead of just the government. The State Department has Libya as a level 4 most dangerous and gives the warning of do not travel. Number 6, Mali. Mali is actually officially known as the Republic of Mali, and it's a landlocked country in West Africa. Mali is the 8th largest country in Africa with an area of over 1.2 million square miles. They have a population of just over 22 million residents. And here's a strange fact, about 67% of the population is under the age of 25. Now that number comes from 2019. I doubt that it's changed much since then. Here's the thing, do not travel to Mali. They've got high crime, terrorism, and a ton of kidnappings. On July 29th, 2022, the State Department ordered the departure of non-emergency U.S. government employees and family members due to the high risk of terrorist attacks and the kidnappings of Westerners. It's not a safe place to be. And it's not just the Americans and the Westerners getting abducted here. They still do bride kidnappings here, or it's also known as marriage by abduction or marriage by captured. But basically, you get captured and you gotta marry some dude. This is usually done in villages and things like that, but it's going on there. Number 5, Somalia. It's Somalia, so yeah, you know it's gonna have some kind of kidnapping. I mean, they got war, famine, extreme poverty, pirates, shark-infested waters, and one of the most polluted harbors on the planet. If for some insane reason you went to Somalia as a Westerner, you run a pretty good risk of being kidnapped. They're big on kidnap for ransom, and they actually do a form of shanghaiing. They actually force those poor dudes to get on the boats and go attack ships out in the ocean. That's died down a little bit over the last few years, but that was pretty serious for quite a while back around 2015. About the time they started putting security forces, or as I like to call them, mercenaries, on oil tankers and cargo ships, that kind of slowed down. Number 4, Burkina Faso. Staying in Africa, we got Burkina Faso. It is right next to Mali. Burkina Faso is a landlocked country in West Africa with a population of about 20,000 residents. And if you go visit, there's a good chance someone's taking you, especially if you're a woman. They're kind of big on bride kidnapping and impressment, which is sort of like shanghaiing, but in a military sense. Impressment is, or the press as they call it, or press gang, is taking men into military or naval force by compulsion. Basically, they make them join whatever military factions. This country is big on the coup d'etat. They had one in 2022, they had one in 2015, they had one in 1987, they had one in 1983. Kidnapping and government overthrows, that's what they're all about here in Burkina Faso. And getting bit by poisonous snakes. And stop typing, I know they're called venomous snakes. There's a difference. There's poisonous things, but snakes are venomous. Number 3, Mexico. Now, earlier I said one of the countries isn't on level 4, according to the State Department. Actually, there's 2, Brazil and Mexico. But they both have this problem with kidnapping. Sorry, that's my mistake. Don't kidnap me. In Mexico, they are big on express kidnapping and just straight up ransom kidnapping. This has been going on for quite a while in Mexico. Somewhere around the early 90s, when a lot of the cartels and gangs started coming into power in Mexico, this became a normal way to make money for a lot of them. I guess impressment would be one that fits here too, because they take a lot of people from the villages, young men usually, and make them join the gangs or whatever. In Mexico, it's really hard to figure out exactly how many people are being abducted or kidnapped every single year for a couple reasons. One, fear of the gangs and the cartels. And then the Mexican people have a real fear of police involvement in anything. One country that should have been on this list, or would have been, I should say, around 15 years ago or so, was Colombia. They were really big into this. They're one of the only ones that in the last 15 years have gone downhill, but they kind of flattened out around a decade ago. But Mexico's pretty bad. Number 2, Venezuela. Venezuela, this is another country that's been doing this for quite some time, and it's kind of a business. They have gangs that do this on a regular basis as a source of income for the gang. I mean, every country's got some of that, but this seems to be a big thing in Venezuela. Venezuela is big on enforced disappearances. That's their government. They also have political kidnappings going on there. And one of my favorites, tiger kidnapping. Yes, tiger kidnapping is a thing, and no, it's not absconding with someone's tiger. Tiger kidnapping or tiger robbery involves 2 separate crimes. The first crime usually involves the abduction of any person or thing someone highly values. Instead of demanding money from that person, the captors demand that they commit another crime on their behalf. Basically, we're going to burn your house to the ground or, do something horrible to your family if you don't rob this bank for us. And then these people go out there, they've been told they got to do this or someone's going to die, and they rob banks, and then it turns into this big thing. There was one probably about 20 years ago, which I thought was horrible. They strapped a bomb to a lady and made her go rob a bank, and when the police got involved and everything like that, they just blew her up. What sucks about that one is that was kind of the first one, and then it became a thing, including to some poor pizza man here in the US. The good news is the pair that did that to the pizza man here in the US, they got captured. The pizza man didn't make it. All right, before we get to number 1, don't forget we have another channel called On This Day. There's a link for it below. We'd love it if you went over there and subscribed, watched some videos, share them amongst your friends. Or if you're old enough, just start talking about them to the local grocery clerk. I say old enough because only people over 50 will actually do that. All right, on to number 1. And number 1, Yemen. You ever heard of Yemen? Do you know where Yemen is? I'm going to tell you. And I promise I'm not making it up. It exists. Yemen sits on the Gulf of Aden, bordered by Saudi Arabia and Oman. It's right across from Djibouti and Somalia. The Gulf of Aden is right at the mouth of the Red Sea and the Arabian Sea where they meet, and it's part of the whole Suez Canal thing. And they've been in a civil war for over 7 years. Roughly 400,000 people have been killed. So as you can imagine, this place is a nightmare. Besides the civil war, there's a good chance you could be kidnapped, especially if you're a Westerner. And they do every kind of kidnapping here. You could be kidnapped and forced to be a soldier. You could be kidnapped and forced to be a wife. You could be held for ransom. You could be a political pawn. I imagine you could be an express kidnapping victim, but not a lot of people there have money, so there'd be no point in that. The only one they really don't have there is gooning. That's one we haven't talked about. There's a type of kidnapping called gooning, like a goon, and it's big in the United States. It's when your parents call one of those camps and they tell them that your kid's on drugs, and so they come and abduct you and take you to one of those camps to get you off drugs. Yeah, that's gooning. They don't have that in Yemen. Because of the civil war and all-around lawlessness, kidnapping is a big thing, along with so many other crimes. It's just a place you want to avoid at all costs. And that's pretty much the advice the State Department gives you about Yemen. All right, that's today's video, and I want to thank Dweezil from Germany. He told me that I'm not allowed to make any more videos about Europe. If I did, he was going to report me to the proper authorities. Well, Dweezil, report me away. Everybody have a great day. Be nice to each other.